Well, sometimes we explore Bible stories that we've heard over and over many times. And sometimes we consider stories that are hardly ever told. This is one of them. Have you heard of it before, other than a couple of times already today? The story is this. Once upon a time, when Aram, which is now kind of the center of modern-day Syria, was at war with Israel, every time the king of Aram tried to make a plan of attack, Israel found out about it. Israel seemed to know every move before they made it, and as such, every attack failed. This, as you can imagine, frustrated the king, and he called his people together and he said, "Okay, who's the spy? How does Israel always know where we're going to be and when we're going to be?" And one of the officers said, "I swear there's no spy. We are all loyal to you, my king." But somehow Elisha, this prophet in Israel, seems to know everything you say. It's as if he's got a way of seeing into your bedroom. And the king says, "Okay, fine, let's get this guy. Where is this mind reader? We need to capture him." And they say, he hangs out in Dothan. And so the king of Aram sends like horses and chariots and an army to surround Dothan at night. He's going to neutralize his problem, which is this guy, Elisha. So in the morning, Elisha's attendant wakes up and realizes they're surrounded, and he's panicked, and he's like, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And the story says that Elisha just says, "It's okay. Don't be afraid. More are with us than are with them." Well, what do you think that means? Because clearly that's not true. We got an army out there, and we got Elisha and a couple of people in his home. But what we read is that then Elisha prayed that his attendants' eyes would be opened to see the communion of saints that was with them. And suddenly, his attendant sees on the mountains around Dothan all of these horses and chariots and fire. What I noticed about this story, though, is that these mysterious horses and chariots of fire that suddenly this servant can see don't actually do a thing. They don't do anything. Maybe they reassure Elisha and his attendants that, they got some backup, and that's not insignificant. You know how much you can be emboldened to do something when you feel backed up. But still, this could have been an imaginary thing, because they don't do a blessed thing. They just are maybe there. Because what happens is, Elisha kind of says, "Okay, we've got people," but then the next thing he does is he says another prayer. And it's about seeing, but this time, instead of opening eyes, he wants the Arameans' eyes to be closed. Not to see the vision. He doesn't want them to see all the people that might be coming to attack them. He wants them to be blind to everything. And lo and behold, we don't know what, we don't know how, but the story says, suddenly the army couldn't see anything. Couldn't see where they were going. And at this point, Elisha comes up to those in charge of capturing him, goes right on up to the captain of the enemy, and says, "Oh, you're in the wrong place. This isn't where you need to be. This isn't where you go. Tell you what, come with me. I'll help you find the guy you're looking for." It's him. Never mind. I'll help you find the guy. And so they trusted Elisha. Surprisingly, maybe they were just more trusting back then. I don't know. But they say, "Okay," and they follow Elisha and say, "Okay, we'll follow you," and off they go to Samaria. And then that's when the fog clears. They can see where they are, only to discover that they are now deep in the middle of the territory of their opponent. Now they're suddenly the ones who are surrounded. The king of Israel is thinking he's got it made. Frankly, if you changed a few details of this storyline could easily fit into a Mission Impossible sequel or any other contemporary spy story. As far as the Arameans are concerned, once again, Elisha, whoever this Elisha is, has bested them, and they are going to go down in defeat. But here is where the story takes an odd and surprising twist. Because the king of Israel can't believe this fortune. His enemy has just walked right on in, and he can say, all right, we've won. And so as he's congratulating Prophet Elisha about all this and preparing to kill the enemy, Elisha says, oh, no. That's not why I brought them here. I think they're probably hungry. So you give them some food and drink, and then you can send them home. Well, that's very odd. You wouldn't expect that to happen in any story, whether it's Mission Impossible or the Bible or any story through history. That's not what happens. Although it is the kind of odd thing you might expect a prophet to say. But what happened next is even more weird. Because what happened next is that the king did what the prophet said. The king prepared this great feast, shared it with those he'd been fighting against. They ate, they drank, and they went home. Okay, well, that's weird. But what do you know? It kind of worked. The story says the king of Aram did not attack again. The end. Now, if you've heard of this story before, you might be familiar with it because people spend a lot of time talking about the vision of all the chariots and the horses on the mountains, where they see these otherwise invisible people on their side. Kind of reminding them that even in the most difficult of circumstances, you're not alone. Even if they can't see the presence of God or faithful ancestors with them, surrounding them, supporting them, they can trust that indeed God is there. And indeed, that might be the comforting message that you need to hear today. But because of our theme this fall surrounding peace and seeking peace, I am just so much more intrigued by these odd actions made by Elisha and the king, where captives in a war are suddenly treated like guests. Captives who Elisha knew were truly out to kill him. Was he brave? Was he foolish? Well, it seems like both. Have you ever had an experience of someone who has caused you harm, wished you harm, or considered you their enemy? Can you imagine giving them a dinner party? Now, before we immediately dismiss Elisha's story to the land of fairy tales, I do notice that before he gives his opponents food and treats them like an honored guest, Elisha made sure he was safe. In fact, he was a little bit tricky, wasn't he? He made sure that the king of Aram's army knew that they were the ones who were now in the vulnerable position. And they might have been expecting to die or beg for their lives. Elisha is clearly making sure that their people, that he and his king have the upper hand before he started doling out his kindnesses. Because I notice in here that peacemaking doesn't mean simply giving in to your bullies. Sometimes we think that compassion means agreement or trust or submission or weakness. And we don't want to be compassionate to people because we don't want to let them think that they've won or that we agree with what they're up to. But it turns out that you can disagree and still be kind. Compassion doesn't have to condone or excuse bad behavior because it's not about behavior at all. Compassion is about seeing people as humans, with all the pain and the human frailty that makes people behave badly, while also recognizing the continuation of bad or irresponsible behavior is going to hurt everybody all the more. So it's clear to me in this story, Elisha does not agree with what the Arameans have been doing. That kind of means he's dead if he does. But that doesn't factor in to how he acts. He's not going to be one of those hurt people who hurts people. So in this story, Elisha doesn't reward the Arameans for the behavior. He's not giving them what they deserve or what they don't deserve, because peacemaking isn't about what you deserve. These Aramean soldiers head back to their king, but you can imagine they're not boasting about what happened. They're not saying, hey, can you believe it? They fed us. Well, they might be. They might be saying, can you believe it? They even fed us. They will return with relief, maybe confusion. They might be saying, we got to leave this weird guy alone. They might also have returned to their king with a little humility, understanding that in the end, they were treated way more kindly than they might have deserved. I think what I learned from Elisha in this story is that if you have ever felt vulnerable or have ever been treated badly or been the object of harm, you should not believe that that's what God wants for you, ever. Being compassionate does not keep you under someone else's foot. But just because you've been abused, it doesn't mean that you have to act that way in return. In fact, when someone else is vulnerable, you don't have to do them harm. If we're looking for peaceful resolutions for ourselves and others, we don't have to treat people the harmful ways we have been treated. But we protest, what if they do it again? Don't we have to teach them a lesson? Do we have to trust people before we can offer them kindness? I don't think we do. Consider Elisha. Elisha doesn't feed these people because he trusts them to respond in any particular way. He has spent quite a bit of time tricking them because he does not trust them to act in his best interest. And I suppose it is possible that this is some giant plan, that Elisha is only continuing to trick them by feeding them. I don't think that's going on. That doesn't really make sense. At this point of the story, he doesn't need to let them go. He doesn't need to do anything. And so I'm inclined to believe he's simply trying to act in everyone's best interest. It's the thing, eh? Well, we can get easily hurt by trusting unwisely or even being trusted unwisely. We are unlikely to be hurt by too much kindness. And if all Elisha cares about is that people are fed and cared for, it doesn't matter what they do afterwards. He doesn't have expectations of how they will be or how they will act, just that they are fed. It is surprising that Elisha doesn't seem to feel that need for revenge. I think lots of us would feel that. But, modern day studies will tell us over and over again that even though many of us feel that desire for revenge, even though we think revenge is sweet, it never feels that way. It doesn't actually help. It doesn't heal. It doesn't bring peace. We don't know if Elisha knew that back then. Taking revenge, in this case, turned out to be pretty good. It's a really old story, this. The present day, when it shows a very different response to conflict than the one we see over and over and over again on the world political stage and in the news. It asks us to look for alternatives, to look for those who might be the Elishas of our day, like Dr. Sarah maybe, or the Village Square in Tallahassee, Florida. I don't know if I've told you about it before. It brings together very diverse people to talk about very contentious issues, and they always eat. They've been doing it for 18 years now. You should look them up. They're very interesting. And they report that, and I quote, "Through all this talking, we've discovered something truly remarkable. People are hard to hate close up." Perhaps this is what Elisha was getting at all along. Thanks be to God.